the person that you thought you knew didn't turn out to be quite the same person when you got to meet him or her in the flesh. Some of those, but again, it's not those, Clay, aren't exclusive to newspapermen, I guess. I mean, we see those going through life. There's disappointments.
So you said you kind of happened into sports and stuck with it, but you talked a little bit about NASCAR and your reporting that, and that's kind of something that I guess you've become known for. And so what, I guess within sports, did something draw you specifically to NASCAR?
No,
well, or just
no. The first NASCAR race I ever saw, I covered.
Wow.
In those days, growing up, races weren't on television. No races were televised. I had never been to a racetrack, had no idea, no desire to go to a racetrack, had never seen a race, had no desire to see one. And one night I was working the desk at the Tennessee, and this would have been about 68 or 69, I guess. And it was a Saturday night, and the regular racing rider had called in sick or incapacitated anyway. And so the managing editor that night, an old guy named Bud Burns, wonderful old guy, said, would he go out to the racetrack and cover the race for us? And two questions were, where's the racetrack? It was at the old fairgrounds. I had a general idea they raced at the fairgrounds, but I had I'd never seen a race. As I say, not even on television, because they weren't televised. So the first race, like Jerry Clower used to say, the first football game he ever saw he played in, the first stock car race I ever saw, I was covering that night. They had a wonderful old PR guy at the fairgrounds named Joe Carver. And Bud Burns had called ahead and told him he was sending to some kid out there who'd never seen a race, and for Carver to help him out. So Joe took me under his wing and showed me what direction the cars were running on the track. And basically Carver wrote the first story that I ever wrote. I just sat there and Carver kind of dictated what was going on. And after that then, I enjoyed covering it, a lot of action and excitement, a lot of stuff going on. In the old days, the Tennessean used to cover stock car racing just like it covers the Titans and the Predators. Now, that was the big sport. In Nashville, particularly in spring and summer, after football and basketball's out of the way, stock car racing was the sport. So it was a good beat. And then Bibb expanded it, John Bibb. And so I was the beat writer not only got to go out to the fairgrounds and watch people like Cuckoo Marlin and Marty Robbins, the country music singer, used to race out there, and the local guys, Darrell Waltrip, who's a young guy who just came up from Owensboro. But Bibb said it's such an interesting beat, he wanted to expand it, so he began to send me to Daytona and Talladega and Bristol and Atlanta and all around the country. And Darrell Waltrip was coming up then. He was a pretty prominent driver and was competing for championships, so I would fly to Los Angeles or all over the country to follow Darrell because he was such a good story. So it kind of expanded. It was a good beat. There was a lot of travel involved in it. And again, it was fun. As I say, Joe Caldwell, my buddy at the Banner, was covering racing. So it was almost like a kind of a traveling circus or a traveling party. There was a clique of racing riders, and we're all good friends. Still have friends today. I have friends, 35, 40 years, old friends that I made on the racing beat. So it was just fun to do. Just a fun, exciting, interesting beat. And it's a little different from the stick and ball. And again, I did some of that too, Clay. I covered football, basketball. I was a Vandy beat writer for 11 years. Covered Vanderbilt football, basketball, baseball, all Vanderbilt sports for 10 years. And then I would work the NASCAR stuff in around football and basketball season. Covered the NFL for 3 years. Got to travel around for that. And then I was kind of the jack of all trades. Bibb liked to send me out on feature assignments. Like I covered the dog show one year at the Municipal Auditorium, and it was some kind of American Kennel Association dog show. And after it was over, they had the dogs stored down in the basement of the auditorium, and somebody stole the champion.
Oh my goodness!
So the best of show champion was missing. So, but kind of funny offbeat things like that I thought were fun to cover that most people shied away from them. But I thought it was funny. As I say, not many people got to cover a dog show, so I like kind of the quirky offbeat stuff.
Neat. Okay. You've talked a little bit about some of the ways that you think, unfortunately, journalism is headed in with the internet and sort of some of the things that's brought about. Do you see any maybe positive changes or any room for positive changes with the availability of the internet and just how quick news can be?
Well, it's awfully tough to do again for an old print guy who likes to pick up a newspaper and have the ink smudged on your fingers when you. tough to see a positive because the internet and again television too, in combination have had such an adverse impact on the print media. It's just crushed it. So it's tough to see a positive. I guess, Clay, if the newspapers have tried to keep up, every newspaper has its own website. But frankly, I think it does more harm than good because, again, the policy when I was at the Tennessean was if you got a scoop, you put it on your website so that let television and radio steal it from you. I'm just not sure there's a positive unless it would be step 2 in my recommendation. Step 1 would be get back to the basics of journalism, go out and get stories and put them in the newspaper so people buy your paper and read it. If there's a positive, I would have the step 2 would be put those stories on your website but I would do it flip-flop. I would break them in the print edition first, then post the stories once broken, the old-fashioned what we call scoops, then post those on the website. But again, as far as a positive, I'm just not sure there's any way to see a positive the way it's being done now, because the way it's being done now it's just crippling the print edition of the newspapers.
Okay. I guess I'd like to ask, what did you've kind of talked about some of the perks that you enjoyed, but what did you enjoy most about like your work and your writing?
Well, you get to meet a lot of interesting people. That's the first thing. If you've got a press pass, you get to go places that the other people don't get to go. So that was always fun. I remember, Clay, what my sports editor, John Bibb, used to say. Like I say, I covered probably 15, 16, 17 Super Bowls. And Bibb, when he'd send me off to a Super Bowl, he'd say, now remember, we're going to know what the starting quarterback says, because of the press conferences will be aired on television. So all the TV viewers and radio viewers, people like that, we're going to know basically that stuff. Bibb says, you're going to be our readers' ticket to the Super Bowl. You get to go behind the scenes and go places that our readers can't go. So the next morning, I want you to take the readers to the Super Bowl and spend a week there and go behind the scenes and funny offbeat things. And that's what I used to try to do. I tried to go out and get these these unusual offbeat stories. And the best one I ever read, it wasn't mine, I can't take credit for the idea, a wonderful writer named Louis Grizzard. You probably remember him, wrote for the Atlanta paper, just a super writer. And Louis was famous for getting these offbeat stories. And one year we were at the Super Bowl, and Louis had left the Super Bowl, the stadium area, went out in the countryside and located a leper colony and wrote a story about what the lepers thought about the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Now it's kind of in a way it's kind of dark, a little morbid, but another way, nobody else, nobody else had the lepers watch Super Bowl story except Louis, and he was so good at that, about going behind the scenes and digging up these really unusual offbeat stories, and that's kind of what I tried to do. I sort of considered myself a poor man's Louis Grizzard. I didn't have Louis's vision and talent and that kind of thing. But if you could go out and mine those stories, they're out there, and they're out there today. Again, it gets back to what I said. You just got to have reporters and editors with a little imagination, and they can go out and dig these great stories up that television is not it's not reporting, and they're not on the internet until they appear in the newspapers. Right. But offbeat things like that. I was at the Kentucky Derby one year, and I came across a guy who had a former jockey who was retired, and the reason he retired, he'd fallen in a horse race and was trampled and just about killed him. But he still loved horses and horse race. So while most reporters were talking about Pat Day and the famous jockeys that were going to be in the Derby, I stumbled on this guy who had been almost killed in a horse race, and he was talking about the experience and what it's like when you tumble down and you see these 2,000-pound horses thundering down on you, and the sparks flying out of the horseshoes, and there's no way to go. You're tumbling along the track in the field of horses bearing down there, and just really, I thought, a gritty story. And yet, having survived that, he was still drawn to horse racing. He still went to all the derbies. He still loved horses and horse racing, and I thought things like that, Clay, I thought were interesting because, again, most other reporters were interviewing the famous jockeys and what do you think about the post positions and that kind of thing. Who's the favorite this year? And those those stories. Also did a story once on the stable. A guy who squeegees out the stables.
Oh,
It's kind of a light, funny story about the secretary, whoever the horse was that was favorite that year. I talked to the stable boy who cleaned up after the Kentucky Derby favorite, and he was so good at it. He had all along the great one-liners. You know, he played along with it. It's kind of obviously a light story, tongue in cheek, but you know, here's the Kentucky Derby favorite wouldn't be anywhere without, you know,
without
Lester Jones.
Yeah. He was the man behind the scenes making the horse.
Get out of show business kind of thing. But those stories are fun to do, and I think readers like them. It's again, it's something they don't see on the 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock news. Those little behind the scenes stories, and again, I've got to credit John Bibb for it. He's the one who said, when you go on these things, look around in the, you know, don't stay in the circus tent. Go outside the tent and look around and see what's going on out there, because you're the, as I say, we were our readers' ticket to the Super Bowl and to the Derby and to these events.